you go, here you go, and I'm sure you're thankful to your uncle to be able to like when you hit that roadblock, right?
Yep.
You go and you start working with him. And you mentioned you're learning a bunch of different things on the job, getting hands-on experience. What was it exactly about welding that you took to?
I love the challenge. I love how those welders, when they got there in the morning, they were the cleanest, but by the end of the day, they were still clean. You
Hi, this is Dr. Cesar Leavitt with another episode of the Way to College podcast. And when I set out to create the podcast, it was to share stories from professionals, folks that are in the trenches, working with students, but also folks, just professionals talking about their educational journey, their professional journey. Lately, I've had a lot of guests talking about the work that they're doing to create pathways and opportunities for other students. And so today I have a gentleman who's very involved, leads a welding program, and he's going to get an opportunity to talk about that. But as always, I'd like to start with their story. And before we get there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him to introduce himself. So, Mr. Love, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience out there?
Yeah, my name is James Love. I'm currently 38 years old. I got into the welding industry when I was about 19. I graduated from the local community that I serve now. So I am a Galveston graduate, Galveston Ball High graduate, and now I oversee the welding program for Galveston College.
That's awesome. James, thank you for joining me today. And James, I ask all my guests, same question. If you had to identify a starting point for your own educational journey, James, where would that starting point be?
So the starting point for me was when I was in my BCIS program in high school, and they hit us with that critical question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And so I came up with a plan. My plan was to enter into the pharmacy field, the medical field. And I started my pharmacy technician program here at Galveston College. And then I got through the first two semesters and I got to the clinical semester. And when I applied to do my clinicals, the state board came back and said denied because I had a previous charge on my criminal history from when I was a senior in high school. So I did make a mistake when I was a senior. And I did listen to my instructors when they told me, hey, you need to watch yourself when you're close to 17, 18, that anything that you do will follow you. And it did follow me, and it followed me into my career pathway to where it kept me from achieving my overall dreams of being a pharmacist. Well, I had an uncle who was in the trades. He was a boilermaker, and when I got that denial, I basically was like almost gave up. Almost was like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I've already put in a year and a half into college, and I really didn't get anything out of it. And so he was like, hey, you go to work, go to school, go to the military. And I was not going to the military. I was already done with school because of the, denial. And then I was like, let me go to work. So I ended up shadowing him as an apprentice with the Boilermakers Union. And I got to travel up in the northern states, got to get some hands-on. I learned the trades the hard way. I actually learned the hands-on way where there was no book work. It was like, hey, we're going to show you what to do. This is what we expect of you. I did a lot of my rigging out in the field, learning about rigging and weights and slings and all the good, stuff that goes with lifting material of tonnage. But I also got to pick up on some welding skills. And so when I was able to touch the welding portion of that trade, that is where I fell in love with fabrication and welding, being able to design or create objects out of nothing and put them together and create these beautiful, welds, so to speak. Um, and so with that pathway for the Boilermakers and the trades, I wanted more for myself. And so I left the Boilermakers Union after about 2.5 years. I came back to Texas and I started working in the local shipyards down here in Galveston, Texas. Well, if you don't know shipyard work is very hard, very strenuous. I mean, it's hard on the body and the mental. And so I wasn't prepared, but it was an eye opener to like, hey, do I really want to be here all my life? And
Mhm.
being a welder, being a in the trenches, so to speak. And I still loved it. I started traveling to the other shipyards, the naval shipyards with my brother. He was in the Navy. Went to Virginia, went to Mississippi, worked those shipyards down in those areas. Um, when I came back to Texas again, I seen that Galveston College had a welding program, and my dream was, man, I want to be a pipe welder. I want to learn the pipe aspect. I want to make the bigger bucks, the bigger money. And so I earned my associate's degree from Galveston College, taking the welding program. The welding program wasn't as hard as I thought because I already had some hands-on skills training. And so when I was done, my instructor at the time, he was like, "Hey, I need you to go join the Pipe Fitters Local 211. It's a union out of Houston. They employ welders, they employ pipe fitters, but it's all pipe." And so I did. I put my application in, and that day that I took my entry exam, so with the union, you have to pass a background, show your graduation certificate from the high school, show that you're a legal citizen in the United States. And when I did all that, they give you a math test. It's like an aptitude test. And
Mhm.
so I passed the math test. You had to pass with an 80% or higher. So I passed the math test. And then by the time I left that hall, that local union hall, I already had two messages from the business agent. But I had my cell phone off because they were like, no cell phones, turn them off, put them in the lockbox, etc. And so I hadn't even turned my cell phone back on. And when I did, I had two messages, and he was like, "Hey, if you don't call me back, I'm gonna jump to the next candidate." And I called him back, and I never forget, his name was Michael Trahan. And he was like, "Hey, I got a wreck in at one of the local shops in Lamart called Farmer's Copper. And it's a pipe shop. They work with all exotic stainless, silicon bronze, naval brass. I mean, you think of any type of metal out there, they worked on it." And so I was like, yeah, I'm all for it. So I wrecked in. And when I wrecked into that job, it was like, oh, you're an apprentice. Oh, you went to trade school. Oh, you don't know what you're doing. You didn't learn the union way. So I got a lot of, feedback from the older folk that were in there.
Yeah.
And I basically had to show them what I was worth. And man, once I showed them what I was capable of, I had the steward, who is like the lead person in the shop for the union. He was like, "Man, I'm gonna get you a test. You should be making journeyman scale. There's no way we're gonna pay you apprenticeship scale." So they sent me to the hall to get my tickets, my UA certs. I passed 3 UA certs. I came back to that same job site with my paperwork, and they started paying me journeyman scale. So I was freshly in the trade for pipe, making 30 plus an hour starting off.
Wow.
Yeah.
James, you go here, you go, and I'm sure you're thankful to your uncle to be able to like when you hit that roadblock, right?
Yep.
You go and you start working with him. And you mentioned you're learning a bunch of different things on the job, getting hands-on experience. What was it exactly about welding that you took to?
I love the challenge. I love how those welders, when they got there in the morning, they were the cleanest, but by the end of the day, they were still clean. you know? And so I was like, well, how do I get like that? Because when I left work, I was drenched in sweat, muddy, dirty, grinding dust, just rust, scale, everything all over me, in my hair, on my neck, everywhere. And so I was like, how do I get like that? And I started watching the older folk that were there, because primarily in our trade, you have huge age gaps. You have the older folks who are the seasoned welders, and then you have
Mm,
the young grunts, like the laborers doing all the labor work, the younger cats. And so I was one of the cats that was like, hey, what are y'all doing? How do y'all achieve that? Well, how do y'all fit it? How do y'all prep it? What does it involve? What's the amperage? What process is that called? I started asking questions, and at one point, one of the elder gentlemen was like, "Man, grab a hood. Let me show you." And so I started watching them and picking up on what they were doing. And then eventually he was like, "Here, try it on some scrap pieces." He's like, "Here, try it." And when I touched that TIG torch and that filler metal, it
yeah,
was just like, man, this is beautiful. I like this. And it just, the attention to detail, the focus, like I said, being clean after work, depending on what type of welding you were doing. TIG welding
yeah.
being the cleanest, but there's other forms of welding that you will get dirty. But that was the main aspect that I fell in love with. Is just like the criticalness behind it, but also like the end product. It's like, man, I did that with my hands. and just to sit back and see it and be like, man, I was a part of that. And the structures that we built are still
Yeah.
standing to this day.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. I can just imagine, the pride you must take, or
Yeah.
especially at that moment when you get to build something.
Yep.
So, you know, you've taken us through and what your exposure to the welding, your education, but today you find yourself and you're an educator. You're teaching
Mhm.
others to do this work. Tell us about how you found this position with the college.
So I was still with the union. We were down here in Galveston building the Jeannie Sealy Hospital for UTMB, and I was on the pipe crew. I did everything from soldering pipe to welding carbon steel pipe, sewer lines, chill water lines for the HVAC systems. I did a lot of work at the new hospital. And so I was still in contact with the new program director because my old instructor was transitioning out and he was transitioning in, and we made contact. My instructor was like, "Hey, this is one of my best students. If you ever need anything, or if he ever needs, some training or some refreshers, hey, this is who he is, just so you know." And so I stayed in contact with that current director at that time. And one day I was at the job site in Galveston and I got a call like, "Hey, my night instructor just left. I'm in a bind. I need an instructor, and you know your stuff. Would you mind coming in?" So what I did, I shadowed him for like a week, and I was like, man, I like this. Like I like talking to the students. I like giving my constructive criticism to the students, like, hey, this is okay, but this is what we want, and this is why we want it this way.
Mm,
Explaining the why and the how and the how to. And so when I started doing that, I started as a part-time instructor at night for the college while maintaining my full-time position with the union. Well, I want to say about 2 years went by. I finally turned in my book with the union. I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna fall back on the instruction full time. Well, I waited for a full-time position for about a year. And then when that director had left, they brought another director in to run the program, and he didn't work out. And so the position for the program director opened up around 2017, 2018, and I applied for it. And when I applied for it, I had my qualifications, my degree, I had my stackable credentials, like all my ASME qualifications, my AEWS D11s. I had those under my belt. So when I presented, my thesis on teaching and my application, I basically was handed the keys to the kingdom. And so I started my transition into program director around that time. And then my biggest hurdle with that program director was COVID. And so being new to the trade or new to the education scene, it was
yeah,
like we were used to books, paper, handouts, talking in a lecture series type style teaching, going into the labs hands-on. But when COVID hit, I had to rejuvenate the program to where now we're a digital platform as far as the ebooks, the homeworks, the written exams, and that nature. But I was still big on, hey, you cannot learn welding sitting at behind a computer screen. The
yeah,
students need to be in this lab. And I advocated for us during COVID to reopen. And I had to create a plan to where it was like, we have 24 booths. I have 24 students. We're going to have class A and class B. 12 students will come in, a student with a booth in between every student, kind of trying to separate, keep that distance, that 7 foot, whatever the criteria was at the time,
yeah,
like just trying to maintain it, but also be like, hey, these students need to learn. These students are dependent on us to be able to leave us to go to work because during COVID, welders were still working.
yeah,
People still needed gasoline. People still needed hair products. People still needed food. People still needed drinking water. And that's the other beauty about this trade that I love. It's like informing those that are unaware of everything that we use comes from some source or some type of welding, whether it's welded pipe, whether it's a ship to bring the materials into America or ship them out. Like it's just so much that is involved with welding that typical America wouldn't be what it is today without it.
yeah. Wow. You know, this is I love your story, James, and could I don't know. At any point, did you ever see yourself, you're taking, well, particularly while you're a student, while you were a student, could you ever see yourself leading, teaching a class?
No, when I was a student, my mind was on making money. I was like, what can I do to make the most money possible?
Yeah.
And being part of that union, I tell students this all the time. My first big critical job was working at the nuclear power facility down in South Texas. And when I say my fitters, I had two fitters with me and myself. And fitters and welders make pretty much the same dollar. Now, one gets paid to use their brain, which is all the math calculations and all that. And then the other one, like me, I get paid for my arm only, what they say, my shoulder down because of the welding skill.
Yeah.
And so we went, our first check on a turnaround or an outage, your first check is always a paper check. And when we walked into Walmart to cash our checks, we basically killed the cash place with all the money because of three checks. We took all their money out of their tin. And so they had to tell everybody behind, hey, we're out of money. Y'all gonna have to come back tomorrow. And it was just like, what? And so the type of money that we were making on travel work as a welder, it's just like, man, it's a dream come true. I tell students all the time, like, man, I used to make income tax checks every week. You know,
Wow. Yeah.
people are waiting on $6,000 returns. I'm like, man, I go to work for 72 hours and make that. Like, you're working though. You're working 17, 712s. I mean, it's just like I said, you gotta have that niche for it. You just
Yeah.
gotta push yourself and motivate yourself. What are your goals in life? And I knew my goals because I didn't have kids at the time,
Yeah.
but my goals were to be established to where my kids, when I had them, didn't have anything to worry about. Myself didn't have to worry about, job to job or check to check, to where I could live comfortably and do the things that I love.
That's awesome. Now, James, congratulations on that. But let's talk about your program now, because now you're overseeing this program, and I know recently you had a signing. So, how big is the program?
So as of right now, our credit side, we sit about 32 students on the credit, which are our adult learners. So anybody that's 18 or older. And then on our dual credit side, we created a pathway with the local GISD, which is Galveston Independent School District. So we created a pathway, and that district oversees 5 to 6 different high schools,
Wow.
and the biggest one being Ball High. We created a pathway to where students can enter into the welding trade their freshman year, but then their sophomore year, they enter into what we call the dual credit pathway, which now they can start earning college credentials or college credits towards their degree. And so with that dual credit pathway, when I first started that pathway, I want to say we had about 10 to 12 students in that pathway. Now I oversee 120 students in that dual credit
Wow.
pathway. Yes.
Wow.
And
Man.
we have 100 incoming freshmen. So in total, 240 potential dual credit pathway students in that program.
Wow. Wow. Congratulations, man. How many instructors do you all have?
So I have two full-time instructors, myself included, and then I have three part-timers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so typically like a welding class, like if I'm a student and I'm going to go into one of these classrooms, how many peers am I with?
So at the high school, we limited because when I came in, they used to have doubled up students in the booth, and I'm like, nah, students aren't learning like that. They're in there lollygagging and horse playing and
Yeah.
BS and so I was like, nah, we're gonna limit this. And so now it's 20 booths, 20 students per section. And so we have 7 sections at the high school, so that's 140 kids potentially in
Yeah.
there in one day. And then at the college side, we have 32 booths. So I take 32 students per section, and I have 3 sections of dual credit here. And
Wow.
then I have my credit classes in the midday, afternoon, into the nighttime.
So you've got these two programs. You got your dual credit, you've got your college credit. The dual credit. So a high school student that starts with your program as a freshman, by the time they graduate high school, What kind of credentials do they have?
So they can earn 2 college certificates, meaning that they've taken 8 college courses with us under the dual credit pathway. And so that means they'll be done with their second semester of welding, and then when they graduate, they roll into the summer session, which is the last semester, which is all pipe welding. And that's where majority of them want to get. They're like, Mr. Love, why do you put the pipe semester at the end? I'm like, because not everybody is gonna make it as a pipe welder. And I'm
Yeah.
honest and I'm truthful with them. I'm like, in order for you to be successful at pipe welding, you have to master the plate. You have to master the actual skill sets of knowing amperage, heat input, manipulation, shielding gas process, consumables, I mean, etc. There's a science behind welding. It's not just putting your hood on, striking an arc, and you can perform the weld. There's muscle memory involved with the hands. There's muscle memory involved with the eyes. There's eye-hand coordination when you use a two-handed process. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to welding that, like I tell students, LeBron James didn't get to be LeBron James by sitting on the bench, not shooting any jumpers. Jordan did not become the GOAT of the NBA or, just sports in general by not practicing. You guys, you want to be good, you have to practice. You have to make mistakes. How do we get better? We learn from our mistakes. And where's the best place to make the mistake? In the lab under the instructor's supervision.
I love that. I love that, James. I often, I remind students about just what you said, right? You've got to put in the practice, you've got to put in the work. And imagine the great thing about, for example, your program. You can make a mistake there. It's probably not going to cost anybody's lives or anything versus
So,
doing it out, at the shipyard or working on the pipes, whatever you're doing, So congratulations, James. Sounds like a wonderful program and a strong established program that you've got there.
yeah.
So, so James, you just, you and I connected because somebody forwarded me some of the information about the program. And if I remember correctly, there was a signing recently. So tell me about that. What was that process?
So NC3, the National Coalition of Certifications, it's a governing body that offers different credentials for different pathways, everything from HVAC to electrical electronics to robotics to welding. And one of the partnerships that they have is through Lincoln Electric. Lincoln Electric being one of the biggest consumable welding machinery providers in America or worldwide, I should say. And they offer the curriculum. Well, one thing that I loved about their curriculum is that you have to pass the written exam and you have to pass a proctored weld test under a NC3 certified instructor. And all the certificates that you've seen behind me that you're asking, all those were earned through Lincoln through NC3, where I went to school for a week, learned the processes, learned the terminology, like learned all the bookwork for them. And then I did the hands-on application, which is the easy part for me because I'm a welder and that's what I love to do.
Yeah.
It's the bookwork and like I said, the sciences behind the processes that I got to reinforce and re-educate myself on and pass that information to my students. So my students also get to earn these certifications as well. And so with that, it the NC3 puts on this national signing day that kind of mimics the NCAA,
Hmm.
where everybody gets recognized for signing for football to a college or basketball or baseball to a college. Well, it's like, why don't we recognize our students that are entering these trade pathways? They came up with the NC3 signing day, and we had 120 students that signed up. I want to say only about 80 showed up because, I wasn't there to pull them by the ear to get them there. But we had 80 students show up, but 120 total signed up to enter into the pathway. Now, we recognized them. We had some of our vendors donate some equipment and some PPE, some protective gear, and we even had a small 165 amp welder machine donated through that same vendor from ESOB. And so we raffled them off, and students were able to walk away with giveaways. But also, we bring in industry partners. I had a supervisor there from Invent. The supervisor from Invent is actually a former student of mine, and now
Oh,
he
wow.
oversees two shops for that company. And he came in because, like he said, we're always hiring. And he said, your pathway to me is through Mr. Love in this program. And
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
that was a big, big talking point for the students. And then we had Miss Carla Thompson from Turner Industry. She used to be the educational services, kind of like reaching out to the schools, telling the schools like, hey, this is what changing in industry. This is what we look for from y'all students when they start to apply to our company. And just to kind of reiterate what I was saying, that hey, y'all chosen a pathway that's going to take hard work and dedication, but at the end, if you push yourself through it, you're gonna see the outcomes, and you're gonna be able to reap the benefits from the actual hands-on practical. And so she was there, and then we had the Lincoln rep there giving like some numbers on the projected growth of the industry and how, as America, we're still substantially low into filling that pipeline for the retirees.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's projected over 100 something thousand retirees in the next 2 years, and we're only projecting 40,000 welders a year, maybe. That's
Yeah.
maybe, you know.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds one like a great opportunity, great experience for all of these young people,
Yeah.
to be there and to go through this event, experience that, right? And to be recognized because I think a lot of times the trades aren't recognized. And those kids that choose to go down that path, are seldom recognized. So hats off
Yep.
to you for that opportunity.
And and that's the other benefit about joining into the trades, because we're so high demand. A lot of students don't really understand the cost of a 4-year university like a UT Austin or a Texas A&M Kingsville. Like, unless you got 40,000 to $100,000 in your pocket, like, I don't know if y'all gonna be able to afford that tuition unless you're taking loans and, putting yourself in debt before you ever earn a degree. Whereas the trades, you have the unions, you have the local community college, you have the trade schools. We're all high demand trades where it'll cost you almost nothing to attend these programs.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
Mr. Love, before we jumped on, I talked about how, with a lot of these programs, the successful ones, right?
Yep.
That it's often it's the people
Yep.
behind it, it's the teachers and the directors and you clearly you're passionate about welding, but even it sounds like you're even more passionate about this work. Why are
Yep.
you so passionate about this work?
I used to be a student. I used to be that troublemaker kid that, didn't really understand where he was headed in life. And when my senior year hit, I was still kind of lost. But then when I was taking that BCIS class, it kind of put everything into a focal point for me. And I remember being a student, not knowing what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And so, one thing that I love about this position is that I get to connect with the younger generation and kind of give my story and say, hey, we all have ups and downs. It's that determination and that will that you have burning inside of you that determines where you end up in life. If I would have laid down and said, "Oh man, forget this. I don't want to do nothing because of the state board denying me," I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. But I was gung ho on like, man, I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna make something of myself. I want to make money. I want to be comfortable. I want to, live a good lifestyle to where I never look back and second guess my choices. And so, again, I made mistakes. I learned from mistakes. We're all human. And I bring that aspect into my teaching style to where I was like, hey, I get life happens. But knowing how to communicate that with me, knowing how to communicate, hey, I need help, that's the biggest aspect of life that a lot of people forget, that, hey, sometimes we need help. All you got to do is say something, and you never know who's around that may help you. And I always bring up stories that I have in the industry. And one of the stories that always sticks out to me is that when we had a coworker, and it was about 100 of us in that lunchroom, we had a coworker, and he got a call that his wife passed away and he needed to go home. And so when he ended up having to go home, everybody, from the helpers all the way to the foremen, everybody pulled $100 out of their pocket and was like, hey, whatever you got to do to get home, to put gas in your car, to whatever expenses you need to get home, you're covered, brother. And like that camaraderie sticks with me. And I still feed my students like that. Like, hey, yeah, y'all are responsible for your individual grades, but when we're in this class, we're looking out for everybody, whether it's safety, whether it's giving somebody a hand moving material, whether it's helping your fellow classmate troubleshoot the machine. We're here to help everybody. And if you cannot be part of that brotherhood, sisterhood, hey, you're gonna struggle a little bit in life, but hey, this is why you're here. You're here to learn. Hey, we're all here for each other, and that's what I like to instill in my students.
Uh, Mr. Love, I couldn't think of a better way to end this interview. Thank you for the story. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and not only for clearly the college, but more importantly for the students.
Yes.
And you're touching them and their families, and like you shared with that story with your former student, right?
Yep.
You're leaving a legacy and you're creating paths for countless generations. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This concludes another episode of Way College Podcast. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to all of our listeners, viewers out there. Please remember to subscribe, rate, share, and don't forget to share the podcast with one other person. We'd appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.